Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Caribbean Bridges. I'm your host for the evening, Barry Wilkinson. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, our topic today, West Indies cricket and what is next. We have an exciting panel for you. In fact, let's go straight to them and introduce them to you. We have Chris Derren, of course, who is the former CEO of Cricket West Indies, and of course with the Cricket West Indies and CWO Cricket World Cup of 2007. We also have a very illustrious guest, Sir Clive Lloyd, the former Guyana and West Indies batsman and captain who did so tremendously well, and he played for the West Indies, winning those two World Cups. We also have Colin James, the journalist there, noted journalist in Antigua, and Sanjay Myers, who is in Jamaica. He is, of course, with the Observer Group. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Caribbean Bridges. It's been a very interesting year, not only because the West Indies beat Bangladesh, but because we are facing one of the biggest pandemics ever called COVID-19. I want to first of all start with you, Sir Clive, on that. How are things in England at this stage? I know that's where you're based. Cricket is still going on, but COVID-19 is certainly wreaking havoc. How is it affecting cricket from your perspective?
Well, I think it's getting a bit better in the sense that we had the lockdown and that people are now getting the vaccine more readily, and I think things will change in the next month or so. I think schools will be opening again probably by March, and gradually, sort of different businesses will be back, will be up and running. So it'll take another 2-3 months. Things start to look a little better, but it's been pretty tough. But I think we've most people realize that it is difficult. It's the first time they've had something of this nature, but they've managed and they've done extremely well.
All right, thank you so much, Sir Clive. All right, so look, let's get straight into it. I'm going to put this question, first of all, to Chris Derren. Chris, West Indies cricket has had a very tumultuous time, to be quite honest. But this news that the West Indies have beaten Bangladesh and are now facing Sri Lanka, from an economic standpoint, let's start there. How does this welcome the year 2021 for Cricket West Indies, who definitely need to get some money in their coffers? How can they benefit from this spin economically for the benefit of West Indies cricket?
Well, I think from an emotional perspective, it's always very good to see West Indies cricket beating anybody, be it Bangladesh and so on. But the reality is that the economics of it don't necessarily matter. West Indies cricket, benefits financially when we play and host test series against countries like England and India, Australia to a lesser extent, because those countries have sizable television markets that we're able to sell out television rights back into those markets. We get zero television rights from the Caribbean, so it doesn't really matter who comes to the Caribbean other than England and India to be able to generate television rights. So, there are series in the past against Sri Lanka. I can tell you that we struggled to find even the money to produce a television feed, simply because the television stations in Sri Lanka weren't willing to pay any substantial amount of money. So it's a great challenge that West Indies cricket has always faced. I always say that he's on the panel this evening, and I use his name very often, unfortunately. One of the great services and disservices that Clive Lloyd did for the Caribbean was, from a service perspective, he gave us the impression that we could compete against the rest of the world in a major professional team sport. The great disservice was the same thing, because the challenges of competing against the rest of the world in a competitive team sport, a professional team sport, is that the income gap that used to exist when Sir Clive played was X, but now it is 1,000 times X, that income gap. And so the great talents that we have and had back then was able to overcome that income gap. Unfortunately, it's just not sustainable the larger that income gap has become. I mean, back then, England would have made, that income gap might have been at 20 million US a year. between England and the West Indies Cricket Board, simply because of gate receipts. Nowadays, you're talking multiples, hundreds of millions of US dollars as the income gap per annum between the West Indies Cricket Board and other territories. And you see it in the facilities, the training, the professional development of their youngsters that are churning out this massive production line. And you've seen it in other sports. So, I felt really great. It was great to actually stay up overnight and watch us beat Bangladesh and so on. We haven't had that joy in a long time. So that's the emotional side. But the head takes over when you look at the financial state. And until world cricket changes its financial structure, we'll always have that gap.
Yeah, so well said. I'm going to just go to Colin because we can go now. We move from Bangladesh to Colin, where you are located in Antigua, for another series now where the West Indies face Sri Lanka. It's an unprecedented series when you look at it, Colin, because I think this could be the very first time that a territory hosts an entire series. And that's for the first time T20s, ODIs, and Tests. That's unprecedented because that would have never, ever happened had it not been for COVID-19. What is the buzz are they feeling like in Antigua about Sri Lanka coming there starting on Wednesday?
Thank you, Barry. There's a good point in Barbuda. The only disappointment is that fans won't be allowed to come into the grounds because both the Cervantes Cricket Stadium as well as the Coolidge Cricket Ground where I'm at have been declared biosecure facilities, and as such, no spectators are allowed in the ground. And this is an arrangement between Cricket West Indies and the Antigua and Barbuda government. It's basically a request that would have been made as well by the Sri Lankan cricket authorities, because with COVID so rampant and the rolling out of the vaccine maybe not as widespread as you would want it to be at this stage, it would be a chance to really invite spectators into those venues. So both the Coolidge Cricket Ground and the Cervantes Cricket Stadium, they declared biosecure areas and no spectators allowed. But I can tell you there's a heightened interest in West Indies cricket from Antiguan cricket fans and from Caribbean cricket fans as a whole, because the performance of the team in Bangladesh has certainly generated a lot of interest in the West Indies team. Even before the selection of the T20 and the One Day International squad, there was a lot of debate on radio in the public about the West Indies teams. And generally, Antiguans and Barbudans are always excited about West Indies cricket, and even more so that someone like Rakim Cornwall would have done well on the tour of Bangladesh, and also the prospect of Azari Joseph appearing in the ODI squad and the squad on the test team has also generated interest. But there's certainly a buzz, and no doubt that the West Indies Super 50 Cup that is ongoing here at the Coolidge Ground, the finals being played between Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, that too has caused a lot of interest among the public in Antigua and Barbuda. With the television coverage and the radio coverage, it's certainly generating much excitement. The only disappointment is that fans won't be allowed in the grounds.
Now, I'm going to go to Sanjay because the COVID bug has certainly caught cricketers. I mean, Shea Hope, his brother Kyle, they caught COVID. They actually missed the first part of that Super 50. And you also had a situation where Ramira Shepherd also had it. Andrew Russell, he actually caught COVID. What's the situation with him? Because he's missing the series because he's recovering from COVID-19.
Okay, well, when I heard it was news to me as well, I really didn't have a clue about that one. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what comes of it.
In terms of the cricketers themselves, the squad that was selected to play against Sri Lanka, did that squad surprise you? Gale at 41, Fidel Edwards at 39. You have some experience there, and that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, well, I guess those two names caught the attention of everyone. I was a bit surprised as well. But I guess if you're going to pick Chris Gale, I mean, why not Fidel Edwards as well? Because he has been performing well.
Now, we move to the question of the evening. West Indies cricket, what's next? So, Clive, beating Bangladesh, many might see as not a big thing. Bangladesh is not the biggest cricket team in the world. But the West Indies have not won outside of this territory, outside of their territory in quite some time. How big a deal was it to beat Bangladesh? And what really is next for the West Indies cricket team?
Well, the point is that I think we have to give those young men a great lot of credit for the way they played. Bangladesh has beaten haven't been beaten since 2012, and they've played a lot of top teams. Some of them England, I think it's Australia, I don't know, New Zealand, and they've really done well against top teams. And we sent some guys who had never played a test match before and did extremely well. I mean, to make 395 in a fourth innings, and it's the highest total ever made in the Asian continent. I think it was a tremendous effort. Then to bowl them out on the 230, you have to give them credit for the way they've played. All right, people might think, well, you can't say it's just only Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a top team. They've beaten a lot of good sides, and although they had just one of their main players missing, Shakib Hassan, but the point is we had 10 guys that were missing. So the point is that I think it's such a marvelous effort that we should be proud of what we've achieved. All right, we cannot sit back on our laurels and think, well, things will just get better. We have to try and pick the right people, make sure that they're fit enough, and their thinking, is right, because test matches. I'm talking now about the test matches, because to me, a test match is like an examination. You tested in all aspects of your game. You only had to look at the last two test matches against England and India. So the point is, that is where you're tested. And I think that you have to have the right attitude. And our guys had the right attitude. I wrote to them and I said, well, in order to gain altitude, you must have the right attitude. They had the right attitude, and that's why they came out on top. Now, we have talented players, but the point is, you have to understand that there's a lot of money knocking around, and it's very difficult to keep our guys at home. We must find a way of keeping these guys interested and wanting to play for the country. You looked at the Roberto the other day, and he made a statement. He said he's going to play in the IPL, but they'll have to wait because my country comes first. That is the sort of attitude we hope. I know the guys want to make money, and you don't want to stop anybody from making money because it's a subsidiary of success. The point is, we have to find a way, make them feel that we are looking after them. That means that if they get sponsorship, that means that a percentage should go to the players. We don't want them to lose out, because you don't know when do you have enough money, sort of thing. But the point is, other people seem to be, encouraging their players to play for their country. We must do the same. And we have some talented cricketers, no doubt about that. But they're wanted throughout the world in these short formats of the game. So we have that other problem. The thing about, I noticed that Chris talked about the monetary side of it. What I would like to see, Chris, is that the money that the ICC is distributing, why is it that every test playing country do not receive the same amount of money? Bangladesh or whoever, the West Indies, they don't play less cricket. Same 5 days, 6 hours a day. And the point is that what you should do, everybody should get the same amount of money. And the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will get a little bit more for being up in that region. So it gives you that incentive to do well, get the right sort of coaches and grounds and so on. Good. So that players will be able to, we can have a better system for our people. Don't forget, we should have a special dispensation, really, because we travel by by playing everywhere we go. We can't go by boat or train or, catch some sort of bus and go there. So the point is, our internal travel is expensive. Hotels, we have, we have players at the high season where the tariff is quite high. So we were in a very unique situation. So I thought that we should have a little special dispensation for that. But the system of everybody getting the same, but if you're the number one team, you get a little bit more. If you're number two, you get a little bit more. But you'll have that money to make sure that your cricket is well taken care of.
Chris, because Chris, he made a point about the other teams around the world having their top players always available. West Indies have been struggling to put together top teams at various times for various reasons. It always seems to be something that they can't feel their best team. Does that affect Cricket West Indies economically? What's the impact there for when there's no top team for the West Indies?
That's marginal, Barry. That's a marginal issue because quite frankly, when we were kings of the world with Sir Clive, we never made much money. So people need to understand the financial structure. Clive made some incredible points. The first is that cricket in the Caribbean is one of the most expensive sports to play, simply because we're disparate, we're separated by water. When the Cricket World Cup was one of the most expensive Cricket World Cups ever staged, simply because we have to fly when we're moving a team from one country to the next, whilst in England you put them on a bus. So those are just factors that people, I'll never forget years ago, and it comes to mind now that we see all the international matches being played in one country. Years ago, when we identified that Western Cricket Board had few resources, but was wasting it, so much of our resources flying teams around, we wanted to create a tournament that we could concentrate the resources on playing cricket, so you'd have more cricket, but we were creating it and playing all the matches in one country. You remember the birth of the Red Stripe Bowl. There was an incredible hue and cry across the region because everybody wanted matches. And people thought we were taking away matches, but it was simply because we wanted to save resources, flying people around the region and play more cricket, focus on the cricket. So fast forward to today, Sir Clive made another excellent point. The entire financial structure of world cricket is totally biased against smaller territories like the Caribbean. And certainly not in keeping and not commensurate with the contribution the West Indies has made to world cricket. So at the moment, you have all this tremendous amount of revenue being generated out of India because that's a massive population. You have a massive television market in England and so on. And you have a fairly substantial domestic market in Australia. And so those three countries command the lion's share of world cricket. So that West Indies cricket is simply getting a share of ICC money based on their world tournaments that they put on, the world events. But we get virtually nothing of the bilateral type of series that take place. You don't see that happening in other professional leagues because that's what international cricket is virtually in our neck of the woods. So in Major League Baseball, it doesn't matter whether the New York Yankees are playing some small team from a small market. There's a pool of revenue that are being distributed to all the baseball teams to make sure that you have a professional structure, to make sure that each team can compete in this professional structure, because everybody recognizes that to have a strong league, you need strong teams and you need competition. The ICC has resisted that for many, many years. I remember the first presentation I made about this at the ICC, when we were trying to get them to accept. They'd actually done away with the fact that West Indies Cricket Board could now negotiate tour rights, tour fees when we went on England or we traveled to India, etc. They did away with it and said, listen, the value of a test match, and whether it's played in the Caribbean or England, is going to be 75,000 US, which was crazy. Because a test match in England would generate television revenues in the hundreds of millions, and a test match in the Caribbean would generate virtually nothing. Zero, in fact, was the television revenues domestically. And so you have this totally skewed financial structure that the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And until that is changed at the international level, at ICC level, it will never happen. The problem is India wants to keep all their revenues. England wants to keep all their revenues. Australia wants to keep all their revenues. And for the West Indies, they can keep all their revenues, but it's zero. And that has been, you've seen the impact over 20 years. You look on the facilities that have been built around the world. You look on the professional leagues that are being run around the world, even in countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan and so on. Afghanistan, you know, is able to fund and have a sustainable type of professional league simply because of the size of their population and therefore the commercial opportunities for those leagues. The Caribbean is very small. You know, one of the pet peeves I have is that we've never really even tried to monetize what we can in the Caribbean, simply because we just simply don't have the financial structure. And so we're always going to be up against it. You know, when I hear, you know, all of our matches now being played in Antigua, I have to smile because, in fact, that's probably the best scenario for the Western Cricket Board financially. They're not flying the teams around and so on. They can negotiate with one hotel a rate. They can negotiate, even the television people that can, you know, sit there and so on and wait till the next match and so on. They're not flying 21 tons of equipment around the region and so on. It's probably the best scenario for them. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to make them a lot of money unless things have dramatically changed in the Sri Lankan market. So not a lot of positives for the future. You know, it's always very heartrending to think about it. But Western Cricket Board's days and Western Cricket's days are going to be challenged going forward.
Colin, I'll bring you in here. I want to remind you, first of all, you're watching Caribbean Bridges. And we have some illustrious guests, as I said, Sir Clive Lloyd, Chris Derring, Colin James, and Sanjay Myers. Colin, we cue you, Antigua. That's where the action is happening, as you heard Chris allude to. How, first of all, I forgot to ask about the COVID-19 situation in Antigua. Are the players worried about it? And where are the players staying that they're isolated away from everyone else?
Yes, the players are staying in some biosecure facilities. They're not staying at hotels. They're staying at more apartments, guest houses. Because of the fact that most of the hotels in Antigua and Barbuda are closed, the government with the Cricket West Indies could not afford to keep them in hotels. So they're staying at some properties which are mostly apartments, and they're somewhat isolated from the public. In other words, the public don't visit these areas on a regular basis. So the accommodation for the players are secured, and the players are under strict instructions from the Ministry of Health as well as the Cricket West Indies. They know what is required of them. And speaking to one player from the Leewards team earlier today, he was indicating that if the players decide to go against the protocols that have been established, they do it at their own risk. Once they go against the protocols that have been put in place, they know that they're out of the bubble, so to speak. In terms of the COVID situation in Antigua, we have had a spike in COVID cases over the last 3 to 4 weeks. That has caused the government to institute a limited lockdown in terms of movements in and around the country. So in other words, we go into curfew from 6 p.m. until 5 a.m. So from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m., no one can move in and around Antigua, except that you have a designated pass, and especially for the Super 50, which is in progress now with the finals between Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, you need to have a pass to be on the road anything after 6 p.m. this evening in Antigua and Barbuda. And that has been in place for the last, 3 to 4 weeks. But the players are not showing much concern about it because they know where they're staying, the facilities are secured. And in terms of playing at the Sabine Cricket Stadium and also here at the Kurdish Cricket Ground, these areas are biosecured. So they can play with the freedom and they play with a lot of excitement and enjoyment as we would have been seen over the last 3 weeks. And just to let you know that the Trinidad and Tobago team, they are seemingly on top of the Guyanese team. They scored 363 in their innings when they batted, and the Guyanese have just lost their third wicket. I'm just trying to look at this electronic scoreboard. I think they have lost their third wicket for just about 50 runs or so.
All right, you're bringing us up to date. Thank you so much, Sanjay. What is this going to say for other territories in the Caribbean, though, going forward? Their stadia is going to be next to nothing. No one is there to have them utilize. This could spell a disaster if it continues much longer, because there's no cricket in Jamaica, there's no cricket in Barbados. From your perspective, sitting there in Jamaica, how much are Jamaicans going to miss not going to Sabina Park or even to Trelawney, where I know there was going to be a major revival of having the games played back there? How much of a big deal is this for cricket fans in Jamaica?
Well, it's a big deal for cricket fans in Jamaica, but it's a reality all around the world, well, for a lot of territories in the Caribbean, and it has been a problem around the world as well. I know that some countries have been able to host cricket matches, but it's just the reality we have to live with. And as soon as we can find a way past or to better live with COVID, this is what we'll have to do.
And when you look at the fact that Chris Gayle is back at 41, wants to play on much longer, is he getting the support on the ground in Jamaica for wanting to play much longer for the West Indies?
I think the majority of Jamaicans still love to see him playing. I know that there are a few people who are saying that he should retire at least from international cricket. But Chris will be Chris, right? And he's still enjoying the game clearly, so he'll continue playing.
So, Clive, it brings you to the question and the topic of Jason Holder, the current captain. He was not in Bangladesh and the team won. He was in England, the team didn't win. He was in New Zealand, the team didn't win. I guess what I'm working up towards is, should the West Indies selectors continue with him as captain for the Test series? I noticed that they have not named a squad for the Test series as yet. Your thoughts on Jason Holder and him continuing, or if they perhaps should stick with someone like a Craig Brathwaite or even a Joshua De Silva, who many tipped to be the next captain?
Well, the point is that, listen, this guy, Craig, was thrown in at the deep end, and he did extremely well. The point is now we have to look at this. I think people must realize too that, I hope you do recollect that a couple, I don't know, it's a year ago or what, that Craig Brathwaite was offered the captaincy, and he turned it down, saying that he didn't want to, he didn't want to like sort of take over from his friend, who he probably wanted to give a little longer time. So the guy has got that's class as far as I'm concerned, and the point is that not to say that Jason doesn't have that. They're all very intelligent young men. We have two guys that can captain sides, and they've done so before. And it's just looking at who's going to get the best results from the players. And I think they'll have to ask the players how they feel playing under Craig, and then they'll take it from there. I don't see that as a situation where nobody likes Jason or whatever. He's done yeoman service for us. He's probably the best all around in the world at the moment. But we have to look at the situation as it is, and then make a decision. We're in a good place at the moment. We now have to choose from a lot more guys who look like they can, they want to play for the West Indies and play for a long while. Young De Silva has slotted in there quite nicely. I think he too, not a very intelligent young man, and you can see from the cricket, he's playing that way. It's just a matter of getting the right people in the right places, and I'm sure that that will come sooner than later. I expect them to do well once the selection is the selection of players. It's a thoughtful situation, and what is the difficult thing about our captains is that we didn't know it from day to day or tour to tour who's going to be on tour and on which captain likes that. The England captain knows one day and Test match, they know who the players will be. India, New Zealand, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. They know exactly who their players are and who you have to go from toe to toe. We don't have that. We are picking players and then they go somewhere else and they're missing tours. So we're digging a hole to fill a hole. And we don't have that amount of people. Those other places have 250 million, you 500 million, 1 billion people. We don't have that. We have 6 million people and who have different, areas of work. So we're picking from a small cadre of people. So we're in a very, a very difficult situation. And we have to choose carefully, may it be captain or players for that matter, who've got the right sort of psyche to do well in all types of cricket.
Chris, I asked you this question directly. We have a CEO, of course, in Cricket West Indies now. He's from England. The director of commercial and marketing is also English. Do you think that was a ploy to perhaps help the markets in other big international countries perhaps look towards West Indies? What might have been the ploy of having Englishmen being in charge of the CEO position and the marketing of West Indies cricket? Chris, I think your mic might be on mute. All right, I don't think we were hearing Chris there. I'll perhaps ask Sandy this question. Yeah, I'm hearing you now.
Well, the only thing I can think of is that if they have links in the international cricket and an understanding of international sports business, then it might have given us a leg up, might have given us a head start. I tell you, as an investment banker coming into West Indies cricket, one of the reasons Pat Rousseau at the time had asked me is simply because of my investment banking experience, but I had to develop international linkages with all the various commercial operations in England, India, etc. So it did take me a little while to get an understanding of the business of sport. So if these guys have come in with those international linkages, it might help us on the international side from a revenue generation perspective and an understanding of how to develop sports properties, intellectual property, etc. There are two sides, though, to developing your commercial property. One can be addressed by the business and understanding that business when you're trying to generate revenues. But a very, very important piece is going to be what Clive would have mentioned, generating the pool of cricketers that you need on a production line to be able to produce young cricketers in the end. So India starts out with maybe 20 or 30 million young cricketers that by the time they go through the India production line, from 4 years old to 19, they may have whittled that down to maybe 500,000 talented young cricketers, of which then they whittle that down to a 40 or 50 test squad over time. So they have a massive production line. We don't have that. So we need to ensure that every single cricketer that we have available to us in the Caribbean is entering our production line. And that's where I think the West Indies Cricket Board, because we have this total international focus by these non-Caribbean people, I don't think they're focused enough on producing the cricketers. And therefore, you have instances now, for instance, they play Super 50 tournament. Because you have to accept that, I think we all accept that the shorter forms of the game now are more popular. People just don't have the time to sit through Test cricket. So, but you have to make sure that the shorter forms of the game are as available to as wide a population as possible electronically. And we're so focused on the internet, and you're leaving out 80% of the population who simply do not have the means or the connectivity to sit down and watch a Super 50 match and stream it all day all day for a game. So I understand the commercial objectives of what you're trying to do, but remember, you're also trying to market this product to youngsters, to get it on television, get it in front of their faces, let them see the sport, enjoy the sport, want to get into that sport. And so that's a very important part that I think they've totally missed the boat.
Do you think that the president and the vice president, do you think they're doing a good job? There was a big change a couple of years ago, and the elections are coming up. Do you reckon that they will retain their positions? What's your recommendation?
Well, I certainly believe that he needs to pay a lot more attention. The challenge with West Indies cricket, as you know, we have this structure where you have territorial boards are in charge of each of the territories. And the West Indies Cricket Board president gets all the blows, and the local boards get none of the criticism. And so I don't like to focus attention on the West Indies Cricket Board president because he has no jurisdiction. Mr. Skerritt and Ricky, can come to Jamaica and nobody cares who he is. We have a president who's running cricket here in Jamaica. What is that president in Jamaica doing to get cricket going? How are they lobbying the government? How are they doing it in terms of getting cricket on television, into people's faces, organizing local leagues and so on? When I was at West Indies Cricket Board, and I know we used to get heavily criticized for it, but Jamaica and Trinidad, with all due respect to Barbados, who has produced the greatest cadre of cricketers non-stop over the years, there's no question about that. But you're talking about now from a commercial perspective and from a production line perspective, you simply want the mass of your territory loving cricket, enjoying cricket, wanting to participate in cricket. And so you have between Jamaica and Trinidad, 3/4 of the population of the entire region. And if you have 3/4 of the Caribbean, or certainly Jamaica, I know Sanjay is very optimistic about Jamaica feeling excited about West Indies beating Bangladesh and so on, but I don't see that. When I go to Sabina Park at a test match, there are 15 people in the stands, right? And if you have your largest population base having zero interest, you have a problem, no matter how well Barbados is doing, no matter how well Antigua is doing and so on. I mean, Antigua has produced some of the greatest cricketers of all time, but it's still a population that is fairly small. You have to bring in the weight of the bulk of your population, otherwise you'll forever be spinning in mud.
I think that's tremendously well said. Just remind you, you're watching Caribbean Bridges. Our topic today, West Indies cricket, Chris Derring, Sir Clive Lloyd, Sanjay Myers, and Colin James. I'm your host, Barry Wilkinson. I come back to you, Sanjay, because it's critical that this election, which is coming up in just about 20 days' time or so, it is critical that after the 2 years we look back at how Shallow and Skerritt have done, that the ones that are challenging them, Sanasi and Hope, they're being challenged, they're challenging them to take over. Is this the right time to try and take over cricket for someone to be running cricket at this particular stage, or should they just stay firm with who they have and have been building upon as they look towards perhaps another 2 years of development?
Okay, well, I can't speak to the persons who plan to challenge. I can't tell them what to do. But for me personally, I don't think that 2 years is enough for any administration to be able to implement all that they want to. I don't know what the standard is around the world, but what we have here in the Caribbean is 2 years is really too few for someone to bring what they want to bring to the table. With regards to some of what Chris was saying as well, each territory has to carry their weight. When you look at the development programs from the different territories, in Jamaica, there hasn't been much of that, and I mean pre-COVID. That is where a lot of the problem is. And of course, as he said, people are going to knock the CWI, but really and truly, it's the territorial boards that a lot of the time are not doing what they're supposed to.
I ask you this question now then, in regards to that. Were people being unkind to Dave Cameron? Did he represent Jamaica well when he was indeed in charge of cricket there and Cricket West Indies? Was he doing a good job in your opinion?
He brought positives, I'm sure. When you look at the PCL, it certainly is a structure that helps to develop players. When you have the 10 games per season in the first class season, that's important. I get the impression that a lot of the problems that people might have had with Dave had more to do with his personality rather than what he was doing on the ground. That's my take.
Colin, I come to you. I mean, the Leeward Islands are obviously back in Skerritt Shallow. That's where the president is from. You know, your thoughts on his tenure so far, and should they continue with him? I think Colin James might have dropped out. Let me ask that question then to Sir Clive Lloyd. Your thoughts on the upcoming election, Sir Clive?
Listen, it's 2 years since the new group. I think it's not, and then they had the COVID, so it's they didn't get a fair chance of working properly. And I'm sure that another term they'll be able to determine exactly how good they are. But at least they're trying to get things done. There's a lot of the sponsorship coming in. We got a lot more players exposed. Yes, I think another term would be you'd be able to judge properly how well they've performed.
You know, Chris, we talk a lot about the presidency of West Indies cricket and the roles that the president has to play. Do presidents of Cricket West Indies play the roles that they're supposed to? Because when you were CEO, we saw you most of the time, we heard you most of the time, you made the decisions, and your president backed those decisions, or you put the proposals to the president. Are presidents perhaps micromanaging a little too much now? Because we seem to be hearing more from the president and the vice presidents these days than the actual CEO himself. What's going on with the micromanagement of West Indies cricket?
That's one of the great challenges of West Indies cricket, because the public put so much pressure on the president, who really should not have a day-to-day executive role. Professional sports needs professional 24/7 full-time management. And you have to have governance, which is what a board does and we're supposed to do, and what a president, who is ostensibly the chairman of the board. But you should have a full-time executive who are making the decisions, who are out front, who are running the show. And, you know, one of the challenges we always had was that, you know, because you have a territorial structure, each country is virtually looking out for itself. So it's a massive challenge. You know, at Cricket World Cup, we had the advantage that no Cricket World Cup had ever been staged in the Caribbean. So I was able to get away with some things that probably West Indies cricket couldn't get away with. And of course, because it was an ICC event, the ICC was very much involved, and I was running the event on behalf of the International Cricket Council. So there was a different structure, different governance and so on that allowed me to move forward. Otherwise, the event couldn't be staged. Cricket West Indies is a little different. It's very different. So that each territory has a certain level of power, which it's very difficult for even a CEO, if you do put in place that structure, to move forward with a decision that might not suit one territory. And therefore, you get this constant lobbying and so on, and distribution of matches based on lobbying and so on, which it's very detrimental to the sport in the Caribbean. But that's our structure. That's how we are. We're you know, nature, history and nature has given us this structure. And we have to find a way to really revamp this entire structure, get the politics out of it, get the territorialism out of it, so that a Barbadian, when he becomes CEO or chairman, he now can truly represent the entire region, whether it be Jamaica or Trinidad. He can make a decision that affects Jamaica and implement it in Jamaica. At the moment, he can't. So, you know, I always used to empathize with Pat and Teddy Griffith and Ken Gordon and now Dave Cameron and now Ricky Skerritt, because I see the blows that they get publicly by everybody, cursing them and criticizing them. And half of the decisions I know were not made by them. It was, you know, coming up from the territories. And of course, the territories control it because they have the vote. You know, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to vote you out.
Every time I think of the CPL, which has been a very successful arm from a marketing perspective, I mean, the financial one I wouldn't speak to, but from the marketing perspective, from the perspective of how Caribbean people view cricket and view the CPL, huge success. what have they done right that West Indies cricket wasn't doing? One, and two, when I think of CPL, I also think of you because you had that same kind of vision, enthusiasm, and track record. You are the best person I think that could speak to why CPL has been a major tick in the box of going forward for cricket in the West Indies.
Well, the first thing that they did was they took it out of the West Indies cricket structure. So it's run as a private venture. It's run by professionals. So they hire the best to run it. It doesn't matter what country they come from and so on. Franchises are also awarded based on where commercially makes sense. So it's not a question of whether or not I'm a Barbadian and I want a franchise in Barbados. If I'm a Barbadian I need to make sure I have a financially sustainable model, I may choose to put my franchise in Trinidad. So, you have that professional structure. The second thing, which we cannot overlook, and I hate to, people believe that that when I say these things, it's because I believe money is everything. But the reality is that a tremendous amount of money was invested in it by an individual, by a very wealthy individual, to get it going, to get the franchises, to hire the players, and a huge amount of investment took place. And they sustained some losses over those years to get this thing going. But it had a vision that eventually it would be a tournament that would have television revenues. I see the television distribution is growing year on year, and so on. So those two factors make a huge difference. No, West Indies cricket, when we tried to really commercialize the sport, people misunderstood, and we have to hold up our hands and say maybe we didn't communicate it properly. You're commercializing the sport for a reason, not to make money just to make money, but to make money to be able to reinvest, to create future West Indies players, future teams, and so on. So financial sustainability is not something that is being done for ownership. Somebody, we own West Indies cricket, and you're going to generate revenues to distribute dividends and so on. It's to put back money into West Indies cricket and to make sure you have this sustainable.
I just want to let you know you're watching Caribbean Bridges, but at the same time, we've got a cricket match, a final going on in So 50, and it's all one-way traffic because Trinidad and Tobago have Guyana 55-6, chasing a highly improbable 363 as their target. So that game is all one-way traffic. So Clive and Colin, I put these questions to you regarding the CPL, regarding the success of T20 cricket. Chris so eloquently put it. But can West Indies Cricket Board, or Cricket West Indies, I beg your pardon, if they were to take over CPL now, do you think that it would have that same measure of success? Or is it only having that measure of success because of how it's being run by a different entity? Colin, I put that to you, and then I put it to Sir Clive. Thanks for coming back as well.
Well, I agree with Chris 100% in what he said. Basically, you have to have the right people. You have to have the professional people running the CPL. You can't just ask someone because they're from a particular territory to be part of the organizing committee to execute the CPL, because it's a highly commercialized event. A lot of money would have gone into it to make it viable, and the investment has to show some return. And once we can get the right people in place, and this is where we have to educate our students, whether they be at UE, whether it be at secondary school, that cricket and cricket administration has a value to it, and they can make a career from it. And I like the idea of University of West Indies offering studies in West Indies cricket, and the whole idea that we must educate our young people that they can't just think about not just about playing or umpiring cricket. They can also get a career in administration, and we have to, engender that level of career development in our young people from the point of view that they are studying to become marketing managers. They're studying to become top cricket.
Yeah, I think Colin will have just dropped up there. I'll pick it up with you, Sir Clive. You can continue from where he's left off.
Well, I didn't hear any of it, but I always wondered, why is it that we couldn't do just like the BCCI and run the cricket ourselves and get the profit for ourselves? we should be able to have, a marketing firm that can do that for us. It's our thing. We seem to be giving it to somebody else to run, and we seem to be doing that with so many things. And I really thought that would be my thing. And Chris would probably be able to tell me why that is not so, that we could be running that by ourselves and making the profit that the other countries are making, because T20 is done. They have the big bash. New Zealand has got their cricket. India's got theirs. Why couldn't we run our own thing? And I don't know. I'm just at a loss, really.
Why did we sell the rights to T20s?
Well, that is a situation that Chris would be able to tell me. He was in that sort of.
A very simple answer, Sir Clive. Unfortunately, we are 6 million poor people. And that's the biggest obstacle we face. And as I said, that's why I say that you did West Indies a disservice when you fooled us into believing that we could beat the rest of the world, the developing world with talent. You created this image in our heads that we could do this. What you did was unsustainable in the professional world of sports. It's unheralded. It was unbelievable when you really look at the statistics and compare our economies to what the rest of the world had. But in the professional world of sport, you can see the gap with all of our other professional teams in the Caribbean versus the developed world. Why is it that Barbados can't compete against England in football and so on? So the biggest challenge when you have such a small population with no television revenue, like I always give the example of the ECB. I won't even use the BCCI, which is multiples of the ECB. The ECB would earn $250 million a year from the domestic sale of its television rights. Domestic. So it hasn't started selling them internationally. That same line item with the West Indies Cricket Board is zero. So if you take that line item over a 20-year span, you'll see one country having $4 billion to invest in cricket and one country having zero. And over time, you can correlate and plot it on a graph. You see the trajectory of West Indies cricket with the trajectory of television rights. And the day that television rights came into cricket, global cricket, was the start of the decline of West Indies cricket, because you started to now get this income gap, which was insurmountable. So why can't we do what India did? Because when we put our television rights or domestic television rights for the Caribbean Premier League up for auction, we will get $0 in the Caribbean. India puts their television rights for the IPL and they get $1.6 billion for a 6-week tournament in India. That's just coming out of India. So they have this financial base that anything they make internationally from television rights sales and so on is gravy. They already have financial sustainability of their tournament. We need it, and I understand the angst over selling it to Dennis O'Brien and Digicel and so on. But who else would pump in? I think they pumped in something like $40 million the first year and made a $21 million loss the first year. Who else would take that risk and invest in a cricket tournament domestically? No sports agent, because if you had those sports companies, those marketing agencies wanting to come in, IMG and Octagon CSI and all of that, they would have come in. And Digicel or Dennis O'Brien would be able to sell those rights now, but they still can't. So you see the challenge we have is just such a small part of the world that we don't have this massive domestic revenue base that gives us the foundation to attack the world.
I mean, that sums it up. That sums up everything. I'll just give Sanjay 30 seconds as we wrap up. Sanjay, can the West Indies beat Sri Lanka in 30 seconds?
Of course we can beat Sri Lanka. We have shown time and again that in one-off situations, given the talent that we have, because we do have talent, we can beat almost anybody. So that's not the problem. Everything comes back to resources for that long-term or that sustained success.
So Clive, I know you still have Jason the captain, Pollard as the ODI captain. Will the West Indies win the T20s, the 50 over, and the Test series?
Well, I think we have got one of the best one-day sides, I've said, for the last 8 years or more. So if we pick the right team, I'm sure that that we'll be able to give a good account of ourselves. I think we can beat anybody because we have the talent there. And you know, I'm now watching it here. Unfortunately, Guyana 64 for 6, and I'm crying in my beer. But the point is that we have talent, and once our talent is displayed properly, we can beat anybody.
And Chris, I'll leave the last word with you. You have been excellent. Can the West Indies win this series and give the illusion or the vision that some money is coming in?
Listen, West Indies cricket has the West Indians have an innate sense of talent, a talent quotient that matches and surpasses most countries in the world. If we had the resources to develop it, we could create new Clive Lloyd eras. I really just want to say that it was an incredible pleasure to serve on this panel with people like Sir Clyde, Colin, Sanjay, but especially you, Sir Clive. It's great to see you again. I've had wonderful times on tour with you, and you were an inspiration to me and my entire generation to walk around, knowing that you were beating the world, and I wish we could bring back those days.
Thank you, sir.
You did a disservice, so let's pause on that. Gentlemen, I want to thank you on behalf of executive producer Julian Rogers, Chris Daring, Sir Clive Lloyd, Sanjay Myers, and earlier we had Colin James, who might have dropped out there in Antigua. Perhaps he's gone to help out the Guyanese who are struggling. I'm Barry Wilkinson, your host, and thank you so much for joining us on another edition of Caribbean Bridges. Bye-bye for now.
See you, Chris.